Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Vilsack, I want to join Senator Merkley and Senator Moran in appreciating your service, appreciating really how much you bring to this job. I think every year more than the year before. It is amazing how much there is still to learn, and I'm impressed by how you've dedicated yourself to learning how important this is. You know, the future challenges and opportunities for agriculture as great, if not greater, than they've ever been, and hopefully we can figure out how to make the most of that. Just two or three pretty quick questions here. One is, I continue to hear from our friends in agriculture the desire for more streamlining in the reporting process. My good friend Blake Hurst, who's the chairman of President of Missouri Farm Bureau, was telling me the other day he has to go into the FSA office and file his report on crop insurance. Then he has to go to his crop insurance agent, and then the crop insurance agent has to refile the same information with risk management. Are we making any progress in trying to streamline that time cost both to federal employees and to the people that they work for?
We are, Senator. Last year we launched, and this year we implemented FSA Plus, which is allowing folks to access their records at home. And this year we will do the accuracy. We started with a pilot project in Iowa and Illinois to try to test market how we would be able to have better coordination between RMA and FSA and the reporting. We then extended that to a number of other states, and now we are prepared this year to go nationwide. So the concerns that he has expressed, I think by the end of this year, he will be much happier than he has been, and he'll also be able to access all of his records, all of his maps, all of his information from his home computer with FSA Plus.
Well, I know this is a project that's been out there all the time. You've been running the department, and frustrating and challenging for all of us. I look forward to seeing it come to a conclusion. Now, you'll remember my mom and dad were dairy farmers, so I come to this next topic with my own personal point of view, which is pretty strongly held, but I believe it's that there are significant parts of the country now where packaged bottled water is being offered as a substitute for milk in school cafeterias. Historically, USDA has recommended that school children consume 2.5 to 3 servings of milk or other dairy products every day because of the potassium and the vitamin D and the calcium. I guess my two questions are, because I believe the facts are that that's an accurate statement about water as an alternative to milk. Is packaged bottled water a reimbursable item in the National School Lunch Program?
I believe it is, but I don't for a fact know that. We can check. I do know that we are encouraging more dairy products. It doesn't necessarily have to be milk. Greek yogurt is now a protein substitute.
Right.
So there's a lot of interest. And frankly, we're trying to be responsive to what school districts are asking us to provide them with and for. So, but I will check on the reimbursement.
Well, I'm not a big advocate for us buying water as one of the alternatives at lunch. There are other ways to get water, I would think. USDA funds being used, you think that's through the National School Lunch Program then? Or might be, and you're going to check and get back to us on that?
I will check with you. I will check on that.
So Senator McCaskill and I wrote a letter recently to FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler. Our concern is that the remaining funds available under Phase 2 of the Connect America Fund, critically important that rural constituents all over, our letter was specifically focused on Missouri, have the same access to fiber optics and other advanced broadband networks as their urban counterparts at a comparable price. What
Certainly agree, and we've conveyed those same sentiments to the chairman, and that's our hope is that as they look at Connect America and some of the other programs that we will continue to see an expansion of broadband. It's also, we believe, it's going to be important for us to continue to stay in that game from a grant and loan perspective. That's why our budget reflects a significant increase in the broadband projects.
Well, I think social access, economic opportunity, all those things matter, and maybe the social access may lead to my last question, which is one, you and I talked right after the President asked you to play a leadership role in this effort to curb heroin and opioid use. On the floor of the Senate this morning, as we're trying to move through this bill, I made the point that actually more people die of drug overdoses now in rural America than urban America. More people die outside a metropolitan statistical area, even if they live than they do if they're in a metropolitan statistical area, even though that area may be quite far from the hub of that. Do you want to talk a little about the challenge to rural America of this epidemic of opioid and heroin use and overdose?
Well, it's a complicated problem, and it's one that requires a series of steps. We have to have more prescribers trained in the appropriate prescription of pain medication. I think we have to have, frankly, reasonable expectations on the part of patients as well in terms of precisely what doctors can and can't do in terms of pain relief. I think it's going to be important for us, particularly in rural areas, to have our first responders to have access to the overdose reversal drugs that are available, that are now nasal spray, now more readily available. In fact, we might want to consider a general prescription that would allow family members to have access to that reversal drug, just in case, knowing if a loved one is in trouble, being able to respond quickly. It's going to be necessary for us to look at ways in which we can encourage states, specifically the state of Missouri, to have a better monitoring program so that we can prevent doctor shopping, and that we have interoperability between states. We have many states with these programs, but they don't necessarily communicate. So if you're on a border community, you can potentially game the system. I think it's going to be important for us to look at ways in which we can increase support for medication-assisted treatment, and having perhaps not just limited to physicians, but perhaps physician's assistants or some other medical professional, particularly in rural areas, be able to be involved in the basic prescribing of those things in terms of trying to meet the needs. You mentioned broadband telemedicine and the access to services may be a way of providing services without necessarily a brick-and-mortar investment. We need to make sure people understand that mental health services and substance abuse services are now covered by insurance. There's, I think, a lack of understanding about that. And we frankly need to engage the entire community, particularly the faith-based community, in making recovery support efforts more readily available. I know in my own personal circumstance and situation, my mother struggled. She would never have been able to recover but for AA and some of the support that she got from people similarly situated. There aren't places today in many rural communities where those meetings can take place. Faith-based organizations, I think, have a particularly interesting role and opportunity there. So it takes a broad approach, and I think the administration looks forward to working with you and others to try to make sure that we put the resources behind all of these solutions, because it is a horrendous problem, and tens of thousands of people are dying, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of families are being impacted and affected by this.
Well, thank you for your leadership there and other areas, Mr. Secretary. And Chairman, thank you for the time.